Hello and welcome to Time About the Movies Flashback. Today we're flashing back to May 27th, 1988, the start of the summer 1988 movie season, because remember, back in the day, Memorial Day weekend was usually the start of the summer movie season. Now it's just whenever. Usually it's the start of May, sometimes it's the start of the end of April, but back then it was of course the start. Memorial Day weekend was the start of the summer movie season, and this particular weekend we had two releases that came out, two big sequels to movies that were popular back a couple of years prior. And we'll start off with the biggest new release of the two, and that is Paul Hogan as Crocodile Dundee in Crocodile Dundee II.
Name's Mick Dundee. Fairly new in town. I'm looking for some kind of job. Any suggestions? It's enough job hunting for one day.
The world's favorite adventurer is back for more.
What's he like in bed? I don't know. He still sleeps on the floor?
Much, much more. You will work for me. You dig?
Dig. That part of the job. Digging.
Paul Hogan in Crocodile Dundee II. Rated PG. Starts Wednesday, May 25th at theaters everywhere.
Taking place 1 year after the events of the first Crocodile Dundee, the rugged hunter from Down Under is back, managing to become a legend even in New York City, living happily with Newsday's tenacious journalist Sue Charlton, played by Linda Kozlowski. Mick will soon find himself neck-deep in trouble when the love of his life becomes the target of this murderous Colombian drug cartel leader, Luis Rico. Now, from Manhattan's urban jungle to Walkabout Creek's dangerous wilderness, Mick will have to put to good use his unparalleled survival skills to protect Sue from Rico's evil henchmen. But do they know that they are no match for the Australian Crocodile Dundee? I mean, you know what's kind of going to happen here, but pretty much this movie is a straightforward rehashing of the first movie. I mean, it's literally the same movie as the first film, except this time instead of Crocodile Dundee going to New York, he's going back to Australia. So it's basically kind of a polar opposite of the first film. And that's pretty much all I will say, okay, I'll take that back. There are some moments in here that I do think are kind of funny in the trailer, I think, but unfortunately the trailer kind of already has them in there. Like, I like the bit where this guy's about to jump off of a building in New York, and you just see Dundee just walking around, just acting like it's not a big deal, per se. It's just like, the guy's like, I'm about to jump, man. It's just like, well, can you move quickly so I can't get going here? And, like, stuff like that I think is kind of amusing. But other than that, though, this definitely suffers from sequelitis. And it feels like a film that was clearly made because the first film was an unexpected success. They didn't really have a good story to work with for the sequel, so they said, let's just redo the first film again, swap it around to swap the cities around to where Dundee eventually goes to, and let's throw in a Colombian drug cartel, because those will be... Is because we have those in action movies too, in a lot of these movies around this time period. I mean, there were a lot of movies where Colombian drug cartels were kind of the big deal, but other than that, though, the movie really is not that great. It's a film that just feels like it rehashes a lot of the same jokes as the first movie. The story isn't really well written, and it just feels like a film that is just basically the same movie that we had the last time around. Like, take, for example, Beverly Hills Cop 2, which came out the year before this, the year after this, No, 87 was the year before this, but yeah, it's definitely not a good movie compared to the first film, but it's still a movie where they at least tried to do something unique and different with it, and had some funny moments in there, but that movie works. This one really does not, and I think it was one of the reasons why Paul Hogan's career kind of took a slow dive after this, because I think everybody just wanted to see him as Crocodile Dundee in any movie he was in, and he just couldn't get out of that character. I mean, he was all over the place when the first film came out. He hosted the Oscars a couple times, and any movie that he was in, it had to be with the same people who worked on Dundee with him, because I don't know if he could get work on his own, which is surprising to think about, but unfortunately that was kind of the big deal, and it's a shame because the guy has charisma. The guy has a knack for what he's doing, and I just wish there was something there to give this movie an extra oomph to it, instead of just doing the same thing that's been done over again. Like, the first time it works, this time, not so much. And it really is a major letdown when you think about it compared to the first film. I mean, it was still a big hit for Paramount, but at the same time, it definitely felt like a film that was already tiring out and already is wearing out its welcome before the second film even got finished. I mean, right from the get-go, it just feels like a film that's been there, done that. The novelty kind of wore off pretty quickly. And Crocodile Dundee 2 is the end result of that. I mean, certainly not as bad as Crocodile Dundee in Los Angeles, but certainly not as good as the first Crocodile Dundee movie. So take that for what you will. So But I will say it's much more enjoyable than the second film we have here, the last one we have here to look at, and that is Sylvester Stallone in Rambo 3.
If you're captured, we'll deny any participation or even knowledge of your existence.
Sounds familiar. The first time was for himself. The second time was for his country. This time is to save his friend.
You both will die. For what?
Just do it for me. Stallone is back in Rambo 3.
Who are you?
The worst nightmare. Rated R.
Some might say this movie was their worst nightmare, but Rambo 3, the third installment of the Rambo series. I remember when this series started off with First Blood, this serious, well-made action film with one of the greatest breakdowns at the end of the movie by Stallone. Boy, has this franchise gone completely off the rails since then. Of course, Rambo First Blood Part 2 was a gonzo, in-your-face, over-the-top action movie, and then the movies that followed after this, after Rambo 3, Rambo, and then Rambo Last Blood, certainly were more violent than what the first movie was originally intended to do. And this film definitely reaches those levels of ridiculousness that, at least with Rambo First Blood Part 2, they were fun. In here, they're really pushing their luck here. It depicts fictional events during the Soviet-Afghan War, and in this, Rambo sets out to a dangerous journey to Afghanistan in order to rescue his former commander and longtime best friend, Colonel Troutman, once again played by Richard Crenna, from the hands of the extremely powerful and ruthless Soviet Union colonel who was bent on killing both Troutman and Rambo while helping a local band of Afghan rebels fight against Soviet forces threatening to destroy their village. And really, the movie's biggest problem can be kind of summed up with that plot there. It's a movie that's pretty much the same film done over before. I mean, it's the same film as the last movie, and this time they're trying to add in like a political message to it. I mean, Rocky IV was kind of trying to do that too, but here, they're really sticking it down your throat, and the action sequences are not really worth it in the long run when it's all said and done. It's a movie that really, I think, kind of dampened Sylvester Stallone's star power at the time, because he was a big draw around this time period, even though he had a couple of flops around this time, specifically Over the Top, which came out the year before, which was not a big hit per se. But at least that movie was at least a guilty pleasure fun movie. There really is nothing about this movie here that really doesn't have anything of merit to it. I mean, except for the bigger budget. It was actually the most expensive movie at the time at $63 million, which, for 1988, that was a big, big deal. I mean, I don't think even the original Batman movie, the Tim Burton one, had a budget of that numbers. But this just goes to prove that even back then, bigger budgets don't mean bigger successes, because this movie did not do well compared to the other movies, and, like, it really showed right from the get-go. It's just a movie that's kind of been done to death. Rambo's popularity was kind of going out of the get-go at this point, because they had that cartoon series based off of the... For kids, by the way, they had a cartoon series that came out, I think, the year before this, but that did not last very long, and it was just very weird to have that. And then you had a RoboCop animated series around that time, too, which was also rated R, but then again, that was a time when you could make an animated series out of anything and sell it to kids, and as long as you sell the toys, it really doesn't matter how good the show is, because it definitely shows that this show was not that great to begin with. But Rambo 3, yeah, it definitely has that feel of a franchise that's just slowly but surely starting to wear out its welcome. Like, the way the First Blood started off, where it was so promising for them, and then with First Blood Part 2, they saw how successful the violence factor was, and so they said, you know what, screw it, let's up the ante here. And when you do that, it really hurts in the long run, and the film really does not have as many memorable moments as something like a Rambo First Blood Part 2 did. But yeah, it really took the series out of necessity at this point. I mean, it would take 20 years before we actually got a good Rambo sequel in Rambo 2008, which was the right mixture of the over-the-top violence and actually some good drama to it. Like, you actually cared about John Rambo in that movie compared to what you care about it with him in this movie. It just didn't work this time around. Rambo 3, you can see why it kind of bombed. I mean, it just wasn't worth it going back to it again. And so on that note, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies Flashback. We'll flashback to May 20th the next time we meet. And there will only be one movie to look at, but it was one of the big movies of the pre-summer lineup of '88. Ron Howard's Willow, which was George Lucas's first major film that he had a major hand in since Star Wars, and they were setting this up to be the next Star Wars franchise. And needless to say, at the time, it did not go that way, but it eventually found its audience later on down the road. We'll delve more into that. when we move on to that particular week on the next episode. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And also, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time. And until then, as always, take care.